Hi guys, this is Dr. Phillip again. We'll be talking about entry-level jobs or jobs for undergraduates with psychology majors today. Before we get started, I wanted to clarify something that's on the syllabus, and that's the books that are listed. The only required book was the one book by what's her name? I didn't actually choose the book. It was the kind of book from the previous professor, and that's just going to be Tara Kuthar, I think her name was, and that's just to kind of flesh out what we talk about during the semester. There are other books that I list on the syllabus. The first two, The Insider's Guide by Sayet, Norcross, and so on. And the second one, Graduate Studies in Psychology by the APA, are both geared obviously towards graduate school. The first one, The Insider's Guide, is geared towards degree programs in counseling and clinical psychology, as well as some that are in like school psychology or combined programs. And the second one is more broadly for psychology programs, and really, again, these are doctoral programs, but more than just clinical and counseling. It could be for the wide range of programs that a certain university might have. So, for example, if we take University of Florida, for example, they have graduate programs in, doctoral programs, I should say, in clinical psychology, counseling psychology, behavioral psychology, physiological psychology, social psychology, cognitive psychology, developmental psychology. So they have a number of different degree programs for doctoral degrees, I should say, in psychology. And the second book, the one by the APA, will give you kind of a broader range of the courses, the programs that are available. The second grouping of two books, one by Bob Sternberg and one by Ron Landrum, is the second two books are geared towards jobs. The types of jobs to look for, the types of skills you're going to need, and so on. And so those two books are going to be more valuable for people who are looking to go out and get a job as soon as they're graduating. And I bring that up because that's what we're going to be talking about to some extent today. So we talked a bit about degrees, and now you have a better sense. You know, we have doctoral degrees in applied fields as well as more kind of basic principles fields. We talked about master's degrees, and we started to talk about the differentiation between the two, which we'll go into more as we go into the graduate school stuff next kind of lecture. So you know that in most places you're not going to be considered a psychologist unless you have a doctoral degree, or you might not be a licensed mental health counselor or licensed psychotherapist or what have you unless you have a master's degree. But that doesn't mean that there aren't a number of jobs available for what we would consider to be entry-level positions that are wide open for people with bachelor's degrees. So you won't find an entry-level psychologist job for reasons that we talked about last lecture, but there are a number of different jobs that are available. And we'll go through a listing, not an exhaustive list, but a listing of some of the jobs that are available. But first I want to talk about some general applicable skills, or what we often consider to be transferable skills. And that's a term you might hear at times. Transferable skills are pretty much what they sound like. Skills that can be utilized in a wide range of areas or situations. And so I'm going to talk about 4 of the types of skills that you can be developing, and hopefully are developing, in your courses at UNF. The first of these applicable or transferable skills are people skills. Okay? And this is going to be communicating with others as well as relating to individuals from diverse backgrounds with varying kind of experiences. People skills are kind of important across the board. And so that ability to relate, to try and understand others, to listen, and so effective listening skills are going to be very important. They're going to be helpful, obviously, in standard areas like caseworker or a counselor's aide. When I worked years ago as a group treatment leader, which essentially, as I mentioned before, was kind of a part counselor, part guard kind of position, I had to use those skills very often because in order to diffuse a situation, you have to be able to listen to someone, let them know that you understand them, or at least trying to understand them. Those are important pieces. So in the classic kind of social services arena, that can be important. I also had to use that when I was a foster care counselor, to really try and listen to the children or adolescents that were kind of in my charge that I was visiting, but also to be able to listen to and understand house parents or group treatment group home parents, or things along those lines. However, the people skills are also very useful in other areas, like in sales, or in marketing, or in management, in personnel areas. In a different area, I had a good friend of mine before I went back to graduate school who had a bachelor's degree in psychology, and he worked as a probation officer. And people skills were very important for him because very often the people on probation were very hesitant, very tight-lipped, and it was important for him to be able to talk with them to see where they were in their as far as housing, employment, let them know that he wasn't always out to try and violate them or bust them, but that he wanted to know where they were at, what their situation was. It was also important for him to get information on those people from others who surrounded them. So it could be bosses, or it could be landlords, or what have you. So people skills are often very important across the board. Anybody who's ever been a server knows that people skills can be critical. So the second type of skills are either what often are termed critical thinking, or what I think of as being analytical skills. These skills really break down to trying to understand a problem. Okay, in other words, trying to understand and deduce why certain problems occur, and how to alleviate or fix those problems. That could be to minimize a problem, that could be eliminate a problem. And so being able to think critically and analyze the situation so that you can look for a more effective solution. Believe it or not, often people don't develop those skills. What people often do is try and think of a fix, and the first fix that they come up with is often what they use. So decision-making skills, skills at analysis and critical thinking are going to be important. The third up there is research skills. Believe it or not, sometimes the research skills that you're learning in research methods in your lab courses can be very helpful and useful. So it's not as much in the real world the ability to set up a research study, although that may be something that's very useful. It's the ability to understand statistics, to be able to utilize statistics and understand kind of tables, results, to understand and be able to use graphs, as well as to be able to use your research skills to analyze problems. It may be to collate data, understand what the data from a particular study or a set of information that you get in a particular business or work setting, so that you can communicate what the relevant findings are. And that's often a really important piece, to be able to go through kind of a number of different findings or results, and to be able to distill down the important pieces based on what your boss or your coworkers are really looking for. And then the fourth on there is going to be writing skills. The ability to write a logically developed report, one that is understandable, one that is cogent, one that is well organized. Hopefully, again, you are developing those skills in your research courses as well as other courses. And I can think, again, my first job out of college as a group treatment leader, at times, we would have to go to court and be able to represent the facility at court to explain how the inmates were doing. And at times we also had to write reports to the court for that, or to, let's say, at the time they were called juvenile justice workers, but now they're seen as, at the time they were called delinquency workers, now they work for juvenile justice. But be able to write reports to explain how they're doing in their treatment at their, for us, it was a juvenile prison, and they were sent to us for a minimum of 6 months. It was usually anywhere between 6 and 18 months. So we had to be able to give updates about how they were doing, how they were getting along at the facility, if they were progressing, if they were causing problems, and so on. And so that was something that I had to do first job out. And then when I worked for foster care, that was something I regularly did. I went in front of the dependency court at the time. Now it's a court that oversees the Department of Children and Families. But I had to go at least once a month, if not at times it was weekly, to go in front of a dependency court judge and be able to write reports, submit them to the court in a timely fashion, and then represent at the time it was the foster care system through HRS, but represent the agency in court proceedings. And so being able to write a report and being able to represent the agency in court was also an important piece. And so the writing skills that you're developing can also be very helpful. And that's true even if you're not going to be looking at a job in what we would consider to be kind of the classic social services arena. If you're looking for a job in the business realm, again, the research and analysis skills are going to be useful, critical thinking skills are going to be helpful, people skills are going to be useful, and report writing. Report writing is going to be can be a critical skill kind of across areas, because a lot of times people want a summation of what's going on with your department, what information you've recently acquired, and they want it distilled down to kind of the critical or important central pieces. So as you can see, these skills can be used in a wide range of areas. We've talked about some of the human services or social services area where they can be useful. We've talked about some of the business areas where they can be useful. Criminal justice, whether that's kind of corrections, probation, those areas they can be very helpful. In education, teaching, for example, you're going to need people skills, you're going to need critical thinking skills, you're going to need writing skills. And so even in areas like health and recreation, there are a lot of areas where these skills can be very useful. Once you have an idea of some specific job titles in which you might be interested, you can learn a lot of information about a job through what the last thing on our overhead is for. It has here. It's the Occupational Outlook Handbook, or the OOH. I don't think I put it on the note shells, but if you go to www.bls, so B as in Bob, L as in Larry, S as in Sam, .gov/OCO. Okay, www.bls.gov/OCO. In fact, that was the last. That was the last website I knew for it. Let me make sure, and I will call it up while I'm here with you. But that is the home page for the Occupational Outlook Handbook. Okay, and so what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go to that website, and one of the jobs that you identified in the career assessment assignment, I want you to take the title of one of those jobs and I want you to look for it in the Occupational Outlook Handbook. Okay? And if you go to that website, you'll see that there is an area that says Search Handbook up in the corner. There's an A to Z index. There's a glossary. and there are occupational groups where you can click on and look. But you can search for careers in any host of areas by title, by area, by you can select occupations through nature of the degree, pay, or salary, things like that. So the Occupational Outlook Handbook is really an excellent reference on certain job areas. Now, it's not going to have every single solitary job that you've heard of, but it will. It has a few hundred, well, actually more than a few. I think there was something like 300 and some odd jobs there, specific titles. And it will allow you to get a lot of information. In fact, for your final assignment, I'm going to ask you to pick a career, and then I will give you a listing of criteria that I want you to be able to identify for that career. And the Occupational Outlook Handbook is going to be an area where you're going to be able to get the vast majority of those criteria, where you're going to be able to find out about the duties and the qualifications, degrees needed, experience, pay, any host of pieces of information. It also often describes resources for special groups, like it could be people who are disabled, or youths, or women, or minorities, or any host of areas. So there's a hard copy book of the OOH probably at the library, but now it's available online, and so you can go to bls.gov/OCO whenever you want and be able to look that kind of information up. So you could actually go and look up psychologist, and it will give you a listing of different pieces of information for what a psychologist generally does, and then it will actually break down different subgroups of psychologists to let you know how what they do is a little bit different. Okay. It'll also give you information on what we call related occupations, and so if you're looking up counselor, it will give you information on counselor, but it'll also probably give you information on therapist or teacher or another job that has similar kind of components, similar skills or traits as that, in that case, counselor. And so that's something that I think is good for you to look at. So the Occupational Outlook Handbook, an important piece. I'll also put the website when I send out when I send out the note to you that this lecture is up. I'll put the bls.gov/OCO website on there for the Occupational Outlook Handbook. The second part of today's lecture is going to be the second posting that I have up, new posting I have up, and that says, I think, undergrad jobs list. And it's a listing of some of the different job titles that people may have, or some of the different job titles for people who may have a degree in psych at the bachelor's level and get jobs out in the real world. Again, the list that we're going to talk about today is not exhaustive, but it highlights some areas and some types of jobs that people have. So in going over that list, the first one on there is behavior analyst. You can have a bachelor's degree in behavior analysis and work as a behavior analyst. Now, you may be an associate behavior analyst, so you may not have, usually in order to become a full BCBA, board certified behavior analyst, you have to have a master's degree, but you can be a BCABA, or classically you could be a BCABA, board certified, I think they call it associate behavior analyst, with a bachelor's degree and certain courses that you've taken. And again, that behavior analysts often work with individuals who are developmentally disabled or may suffer from autism or Asperger's syndrome, but they can also work in school systems, and they can do different types of work with children. They actually work with animals very often and do dog training or animal training. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with a psych degree if you specialize in kind of behavioral work. And if you have the chance to work with Dr. Everson before you leave and graduate, and before he leaves UNF, I highly recommend it. He is a very well-known, well-respected, well-published, and very kind of practice-oriented behavior analyst. You've got a generic kind of thing like caseworker, which usually means kind of case manager, where you oversee any host of things. That could be people who are disabled or people who are coming out of prison or jail and need kind of re-entry. That could be overseeing people who live in a particular facility or group home. So there are a lot of ways that can work. Child protection worker, I'll talk a little bit more as we get down the list a bit. You have a counselor's aide. What we'll see also, corrections officer, parole officer, probation officer. There you're looking at juvenile justice, and all three of those are often jobs that people with a bachelor's degree in psychology can certainly get. It may not seem like that makes a lot of sense, but there are, again, a lot of skills that you'll learn in psychology that'll help you understand people maybe a little bit better than others and be able to kind of interact with them more effectively. Diffuse situations as opposed to incite situations. Additionally, there is a large call for psychologists and therapists in the correctional system, and so working in a corrections system as a corrections officer or probation or parole, and then going back to graduate school may very often give you insight into the population, into the inner workings of a particular facility, and that can be very helpful if you're looking for a job in that area down the line. Daycare center supervisor or substance abuse counselor. There are some cases where you can be a substance abuse counselor with a bachelor's degree. And so that's an area where you don't necessarily have to be a licensed mental health counselor. That's an area to really look into. Sometimes you can get a certificate and take a few post-baccalaureate or graduate level courses without getting a full degree. And sometimes you can do that kind of work without having a master's degree or any master's courses at all. Employment counselor, that can be that's another area where people will often be able to kind of interact and be able to help people get into jobs, fit their skills with the types of skills or abilities that are necessary for a job. So understanding those things is important. Family service worker, group home coordinator, these are pretty self-explanatory. Residential youth counselor. Now that could be for a facility. That might be something like a group home. It could be for a runaway shelter. It could be sometimes for a halfway house, or it could be sometimes there's something in the juvenile justice arena. There's a place called Eckerd Youth Camp, and that's often where kids who are delinquent or having some significant difficulties in behavior and some legal consequences, they may get sent there. And so it's interacting with them on an ongoing basis. And then if we get down farther, you're going to see foster care counselor, protective supervision counselor. That goes along with kind of child protection worker or social service worker. Here you're looking at some of the classic areas that people often think of. As I mentioned before, I've worked as a foster care counselor for it was about a year and a half. And I would not only do things like visit some of the children. I worked primarily with adolescents, so I would visit the adolescents at either the individual homes or group homes that they were at. Sometimes I'd visit them at school. I had a number of kids that were out of state and were in long-term placements, so I'd have to go to those placements not only to visit the children, but also to be able to kind of review the facility to make sure that the places that we had the adolescents were appropriate. And so I actually end up flying around the nation. I regularly went to Georgia, I went to Pennsylvania, to Texas, to Arizona. Those are the primary places because those are the areas I had, a number of kids. Ohio sometimes. And then sometimes I would actually fly, I would go with kids and fly them if they were being sent to live with a different member family who was out of state, I would act as their kind of liaison and take them from one place to another. And so those are that's not, I mean, that's a common part of being a foster care counselor, but there are other pieces I mentioned before, and that's going to be their inter-office or inter-agency and departmental kind of reports to write, meetings to attend, and then there's also a lot of court work, and I really enjoyed that. So those are things. Now, it's a difficult area because in foster care or protective supervision, you often it's a difficult situation for many of the kids as well as the families. But if you're straight with them, especially the teens, usually they'll be reasonably straight with you, because if you're not bullshitting them, they'll usually be able to pick out if you're bullshitting them pretty quickly, because people often lie to them. So if you're straight with them, they'll at least be able to kind of begrudgingly give you the respect of having been straight with them. So going on to the second group that I have under various positions. Various positions, it says, note, a minor in a related field will likely be helpful. And so things like child care worker, or I think down to the bottom, teacher, something along those lines, something in a minor in education, whether that be elementary education or anything along those lines. Getting maybe a minor in special ed, if you're able to, might be very helpful in getting a job in one of those fields. Community relations, that's a good one where your people skills are really going to be helpful. Congressional aid, it doesn't seem like that'd be a glorious job, but for people who are interested in the inner workings of the legislature, that's often an area that people can get their foot in the door. Newspaper reporter, sounds crazy, but people often do that, especially if your writing skills are good, your research skills are good. Those are important pieces. College admissions counselor, college admissions recruiter, you can often do those jobs with bachelor's degrees. And so when I worked at Jacksonville University, I know that they had people with bachelor's degrees working at admissions, because some of them had been students at JU and gotten their bachelor's degree at JU. May not sound like it's a glorious job, but I will say this much, working in an academic setting, you often get a number of days off that most other people don't. I mean, it was the running joke when I was teaching. I was like, there are only two groups of people that get 3 weeks off over Christmas, 2 to 3 weeks off over Christmas, get their summers off, get a week off in the middle of March for absolutely no reason, and that tends to be students and teachers. So being able to kind of be in that area working for a college, there's often the opportunity to make reasonable money. It also allows you to maybe move up the ladder, and sometimes you can, if you're working for an institution, sometimes you can get educational benefits. So you could go back part-time to graduate school, and you may not have to pay for much, if any of it. Alumni relations, that's another area. Fundraising. Then we get into some other areas like technical writer or statistical assistant. That's going to be helpful to really specialize in those areas. And so taking some advanced courses in statistics or mathematics if you have a proclivity for it. Technical writer, you may want to minor in English or in something where you're going to do a good amount of writing so that you can emphasize your writing clarity and ability. And then there's some areas like recreation director. They very often have areas where you can work as a recreational assistant, a recreational therapy assistant. So recreational therapists very often require advanced degrees, although they don't necessarily have to. And so that's another area that might be helpful. And it may seem like, well, what the hell do recreational therapists or therapy assistants do? Well, they often work with hospitals, or they can work with retirement communities, rehab facilities, retirement communities, any host of areas. And so thinking about those fields could be a good piece as far as possible jobs or careers down the line. And then the last grouping is, well, actually, before I go on, remember teachers also an option. and that can be elementary, middle, or high school. Again, it's probably helpful to get a minor in education or be able to take certain courses in education with your electives. And it's helpful to minor in an area of interest because what that'll do is that helps round out your qualifications. As I mentioned before, I had two friends, one who had a degree in business and one who had a degree in psychology and a minor in business, and they both got essentially the same job with different groups, one with Office Depot and one with Staples. So it's not, man, what's up with my nose? Itchy as hell. So getting a minor in a particular area of interest or an area that, where you could see yourself working could be a good piece. The last grouping is business, and you can see there are a number of possible careers in business that might fit. Again, a minor in business will likely be helpful. If you can't pull off a minor, make sure to get courses in the particular area or areas of interest. But things like advertising, customer relations, marketing, and management both have a lot of applications for psychology majors. You can see they have an insurance agent, which doesn't sound like a particularly interesting job to me, but some people might like it. Employment counselor. You've got things like more specialized things like airlines reservations, claims specialist. And then you go into areas like marketing representative or researcher. You have public relations, and then you have sales representative and a variety of different management positions. That can be store, that can be warehouse, that can be in things like retail or restaurant, hotel, those kinds of areas. And to that end, you might want to look into seeing, I don't know if UNF has this right now, but you might want to see if they have something like hospitality. And so if you could minor in hospitality, that might help you get into that arena. If that's an area of interest for you. And then classic things like customer service, or again, public relations, as I mentioned before. So there are a number of different possible jobs in the psych realm, but also outside the psych realm, and in areas in education, criminal justice, and certainly business. So that is, I'm going to keep this one short, because the next one we're going to be having, the graduate school one, will be longer. In fact, the graduate school lecture will probably be chopped into two different parts because it'll be long enough that one long lecture on YouTube probably won't work. So I'll probably cut that one into two. So signing off for now, and the grad school lecture should be up soon. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me, dphillip with one L, at unf.edu. Got a few emails from people regarding the career assessment assignment. If you haven't been able to get it into me yet, please make sure to get it in as soon as possible. You can hand in one assignment late, but I don't recommend that being the first one if you don't have to have it that way. But if you're in that position, don't worry, you can hand it in, you won't get docked, so just get it in as soon as you can. Okay? Hope everybody's doing well, and I will talk with you guys again soon.